afternoon again, everybody, and welcome to Manny Diaz's press conference. In this press conference, we'll do the raise hand feature. We will go straight to questions, and we will start with Mark Brennan and then Joe Giuliano.
Hey, Manny, welcome to State College.
Thank you.
Hey, appreciate your time today. The other day on the signing day show, you had mentioned that your defensive philosophy was in line with James Franklin, and then you were like-minded in other ways. I wonder if you could expand on those things a little bit. Thanks.
Yeah, because I think this is about the Penn State defense. I think it's bigger than any one person. I think there's been really going back to Coach Franklin's days at Vanderbilt. I mean, I think he's established a style of play on defense. It's been very aggressive. It's presented as very multiple to the offense. Trying to create negative plays while at the same time trying to limit explosive plays allowed. Those are all things that are in my background. But I think more than anything, it still comes down to the toughness, the physicality, the work ethic, the trust. To me, all those sort of pillars that you need to have to play great defense. That no matter how the roster turns over, no matter how coaches turn over, that there's just a style that carries forward. So I think when he and I started speaking about, who we were and what we wanted to be, I think we were all, sort of speaking the same language.
Joe Giuliano and then Greg Pickle.
Hello, Manny. I work for the Philadelphia Inquirer, and I know this might seem like old news to you, but my questions are, why did the Temple job interest you, and why did you leave?
Hey, Joe. I think the Temple job interests me the same way it interests a lot of people. I think it's an outstanding job. It's a place where you can win. It's a place where you can recruit great players, and there had been a track record of that going in there, and I was very excited about that opportunity. Head coaching jobs are really, really hard to get, and I was very grateful to the administration there at that time, Pat Kraft, and to the members of the board that picked me to be their head coach. But as I mentioned, head coaching jobs are really, really hard to get, and when the unforeseen events occurred on a few weeks later, with Mark Richt retiring and had the opportunity to be the head coach of my hometown team. That was the one-off opportunity that I just couldn't say no to. We tried to do it the right way. I mean, I think from the time that I heard the news that Mark had retired, I think that was around 11:30 in the morning. I think by the time the sun went down that night, I think I was the head coach at Miami, and we were very transparent with the people at Temple along the way to let them know what happened. So. It's just a very, very, if you follow college football and the coaching profession in general, I think there's a very, very unique set of events. I don't know if it could ever happen again in that same sequence. And it just happened to involve me in the middle of all that.
Greg Pickle, Blue White Illustrated, and then we'll go to Audrey Snyder.
Sorry, Chris, I think we were playing a little bit of mute back and forth there. Hi, Coach. How are you? It's nice to meet you.
Doing well, Greg. Good to meet you as well.
Thanks for your time. Hey, when you put out a statement about it's a situation at Miami, you said you were disappointed about how things played out. Was there ever a thought to not coach this year, or were you always going to find a place to coach in 2022? And why did Penn State end up so quickly being that place for you?
Greg, the answer to that question, as honest as I can tell you, is I had no idea. I think everything was on the table when you come out of a situation like what we came out of at Miami. You don't really know where you're going to go next, and I've always kind of felt in my mind when presented in moments of transition in my life to sort of I've always felt like God sort of shows his hand at that time and sort of nudges you a certain way, and I think the way that James reached out. If you're talking about defensive coordinator jobs and premier defensive coordinator jobs across the country, Penn State has got to be up there with the best of them. And so it's not something that, I sought out. I didn't know how it all happened. I didn't know. And certainly, you have to keep in mind, Greg, the college ball coaching carousel calendar is totally out of whack. We're in a new world from where we've been. It's very rare to hire coordinators in mid-December. I don't even know what day it is. This past month has been a hell of a year. I'll tell you that. So I didn't know where I was going to go. I wanted to kind of be organic and see what the best opportunity was and make sure it was a place where, you know, I could make sure I was around great people, like-minded people that were about the right things and that we could win. And certainly if it was going to be at a defense coordinator level, that it was where we had a chance to play great defense. And I think Penn State ticked all those boxes.
Audrey Snyder, The Athletic, then Corey Geiger.
Hey, Manny, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You mentioned kind of that this has felt like a year. Can you kind of take us through the last 10 days for you? What was the most challenging part just for you professionally and personally? And at what point did James reach out to you?
Oh, so what day is today? Friday? So, yeah, I mean, I suppose it was the early part of last week was the first time that James reached out. And at that point, I just didn't know what my timetable was and how quickly my thought process was for sort of jumping back in. And in fact, even when James first reached out, your natural instinct again is the way that things normally were, is that, okay, yeah, maybe in January there will be a thing here. And I started to realize, with the all powerful signing day, which has become so, sort of the overlord over all of college football looming, that this was going to happen. If it was going to happen, it was going to happen pretty quick. So, I mean, I think that was into Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of last week, and really by Thursday, I think we're just about at yes. And I think Friday morning, Friday midday is when I think we finally, agreed on all the tiny details, and I was here walking out of the State College Airport Friday night at 11 p.m. and watching a football practice the next day. That was a whirlwind. That was quite an extraordinary turn of events. So and now it's been great to be here this week. It's a unique situation for me to be able to watch this team, to watch the staff. There's a great coaching staff here on both sides of the ball. The strength staff, and see what they do with this team, and now that today I'll be able to observe my third practice and just see how the team works. You see how they operate, the tempo in which they practice with, the way that they compete. Normally, when you take a new job, you don't get to see those things until spring practice. So to get an opportunity to get in here in December and really get a feel for I know this word gets thrown around a lot in college football, but they really get a feel for the culture of the program. It's been a very unique situation, and I'm glad it happened this way.
Corey Geiger, DK Pittsburgh Sports. Then we'll go to Andrea Adelson.
Manny, I want to ask you if there's a better way to do all of this chaos. You've been on both sides. You've been asked about the Temple situation. Then you were at Miami and things that happened over the last 10 days for you there. You also called signing day the overlord of college football. It seems to be a lot of insanity for this week or two period. Is there a better way for college football to do this? And maybe a part of that question might be just getting rid of this early signing day in December. Would that help all of this?
Well, Corey, I think everyone agrees there's a better way. I just don't know if anybody can agree on what that better way is. And you mentioned getting rid of the early signing day, but the early signing day has a lot of great advantages. And then what would you do with mid-years? Just about everybody's class now, about half the guys are mid-years. And look, the biggest thing that changed everything is the transfer portal, which I think everybody gets, because you've got players leaving college football teams midway through the season. They all want to find new landing ground before the spring semester. So because we are a school, and because this is collegiate sports, scholastic sports, right? We deal in semesters. So there's always an urgency to add new players at the turn for the semester. So that part of our calendar, like in the NFL, they play a season, then they change all the coaches, and then they change all the players, right? Free agency begins, they have an NFL draft. They can set it whenever they want to. It's more difficult at the college level for us to marry our calendar, as well-intentioned as that may be, because we have a school semester in the spring, and we want our the student athletes and the coaches have a lot of incentive to get as many of their players there for January as they possibly can. And then if they can't get there in January, then they got to get there for summer school. So like I said, it's easier to identify the problem. It's much more complicated to come up with a solution, because I don't know that there's one, as with most hard problems, if there was one solution, it probably would have been figured out by now and implemented.
Andrea Adelson, ESPN, and then we'll go to Rich Scarcella.
Hey, Manny, now that I guess a week has passed, how do you kind of square the way Miami handled the whole situation with you and the coaching search? And then the second part of that is, how do you view your path now in terms of potentially being a head coach again?
Andrea, I think I kind of spoke my piece on that in my statement. I'd rather remember my time at Miami for the positives. I think we did things the right way. I think we left the place in really good shape. Having the second most wins in the ACC to Clemson in the conference in the 3 years that we were there, to win 12 league games over the past 2 years. I think there's a lot of good things. There's obviously losses that ultimately were costly, which I'm responsible for, and I get it. But the relationships, the way we treated the players, the way we had our staff together, those are the real positives. In terms of being a head coach going forward, that's the last thing on my mind right now. I know we did it the right way. You can do things the right way, and because we play a game, where there's only one or two outcomes. You got to win or lose, and there's accountability for that. So I get that. If God willing that ever happens again, there's a lot of positives that I can take out of my first experience to the next time. But for right now, what I really want to do is I really want to serve James Franklin. And if anything now, not just, you're always improving and evolving as defensive coordinator, but now to be able to serve a head coach, with some of the experience I have and now understanding all the things that he goes through on any given day, you don't get it until you're really, in that office. And there's some things about it that I'll miss. There's some things about it that I certainly won't miss. What I'm really excited about is coaching defensive football at Penn State University. That's fun to say out loud. And that's really where all my focus is at right now.
Rich Scarcella, Reading Eagle, and then John Sauber.
Hi, Manny. How are you today?
Doing well. How are you, Rich?
I'm fine, thanks. You mentioned James's time at Vanderbilt. So how far does your relationship go back with him? How closely have you followed his career, and how often have you guys stayed in touch?
We would be in the more acquaintance level of football, where you run through guys, bump each other recruiting or at conventions, things like that. He stood, when I became a head coach and you go into the AFCA head coaching meetings, you see him and his voice and how he stands up for what's right in college football. The Vanderbilt connection goes more to my relationship with Bob Shoup. Bob and I have been friends from when Bob was at William & Mary, and then James brought him to Vanderbilt because I'd been at Middle Tennessee. I don't think we were in the area exactly at the same time, but philosophically, Bob and I were very closely aligned in the way that we like to be aggressive, attack, pressure defenses, different looks. And then certainly Brent came, Brent took over and like what anybody would do, you sort of put your own advancements and developments on a scheme. So, but what you can see is that in James' time as being head coach, his defensive philosophy, matched by the people who have worked with him, has been to be very aggressive and very multiple. And I think that's why when we spoke about what he envisioned going forward, I think that's why it made sense. But I always think just as if there's no program that everything is about the head coach, there's no defense, it's everything about the defense coordinator. I've sat here for a week and I've watched an unbelievable defensive staff in that room. I can see why they were successful beyond, Brent, who's a big time coach. And then ultimately what it comes down to the players, and that's why you want to coach defense at a school where you can attract top defensive recruits. And I think we did that this past Wednesday, and I think we've got some guys in the locker room that would fit that bill as well.
John Sauber, Center Daily Times, then Mike Gross.
Hey, Manny, how are you?
Well, John, how are you?
I'm doing good, thanks. You mentioned that you sort of have a new perspective now that you were a head coach and are a defensive coordinator again. What did you learn specifically that will help you as a defensive coordinator? And then is it going to be difficult at all to transition back to not being the guy at the program?
It hasn't been so far. I think what you want is you realize there's so much on a head coach's plate. There are so many things that come at you in a 24-hour day. And what you ultimately want out of your staff is, as low maintenance as possible. And so whether that's him knowing that we've got everything handled in terms of that we're organized on our side of the football, in terms of how our guys are behaving off the field, recruiting. I mean, whatever it is, because there are only so many decisions one man can make in any day. And ideally, as a head coach, you want to hire really, really talented people. No different than a coordinator. You want to work with a really talented staff, so that everybody can sort of, do their part. And if everybody does their part, the wheel just turns so much easier and so much faster. So I think I think that's one of the things that I wanted to, bring to him and understand, how we can make each other's lives easier.
Mike Gross, Lancaster Newspapers, and then Daniel Gallen.
Manny, welcome. Good afternoon.
Thank you.
James, two of James's favorite terms are turnovers and explosive plays as keys to winning. And I'm interested in this idea that being aggressive defensively and maybe disrupting, and then on the other end, not letting the other guys get behind you and giving up explosive plays. How do you manage both of those things from a defensive standpoint?
Well, first of all, I agree with James. We had a plan to win at Miami, and 1 and 2 were win the explosives and win turnovers. And there's mounds and mounds of data that support that. I've always felt like those things, yet to your point, I think it feels like the train is pulling in two opposite directions. How can you be aggressive up front and not be more susceptible to big plays on the back end? I don't think that's true. I think in this state, there's been an example historically over 20 years of playing defense, and very often, not always with the same degree of success, but the Pittsburgh Steelers have always prided themselves on the ability to be very aggressive up front and not give up big plays in the back end. So, and those are conversations that, and again, I go back to, Bob Shoop and I having conversations 15 years ago about the same topic. So to me, it's about how you structure your coverages. I mean, look, explosive plays usually happen because, number one, a blown coverage, it's a misassignment. That's something that should be handled from a preparation standpoint. Missed tackles, a lack of effort getting the football. Those type of things usually create explosive plays more so than just, just being careless schematically. And that's something that we don't ever want to be. You still want to make offenses earn everything they get on you, which is important. It's always been important. With the way that the game is slanted towards offense right now, it's doubly important. So I get it. I could see where you could feel like those two things are in conflict. I don't feel that they are.
We have time for 2 more questions. We'll start with Daniel Gallen from Penn Live, and then we'll finish with Andrew Clay.
Hey, Manny, nice to meet you.
Hey, Daniel, how are you?
Doing well. James Franklin talked a lot about kind of keeping continuity with making this new defensive hire based on the personnel that's on the roster and the personnel that's been recruited to the roster. What do you make of the personnel that's already here? And what do you think you can bring that's a little bit different? Or how do you think you can kind of put your own defensive stamp on this unit?
Yeah, I've seen the guys practice twice. And obviously even with the bowl game, as you all are aware, there's some different guys in some different spots, not different spots per se, but, roles changing, which is kind of the new normal now in college football. Look, where it all starts, we're going to be a 4-down attack style front. It's what they've been. It's what we're going to be. We know how big a deal linebacker play is right here and how we fit in with the linebackers and how fast and aggressive we can get those guys to play behind. And then secondary, our ability to mix up playing man zone, show different looks, do those type of things, and be very disruptive in our back end. So all those guys who have been recruited to our program right now, based off of those, basically the same 3 characteristics at all 3 levels of the defense, none of that's going to change, which I think James is very comfortable with. We weren't going to all of a sudden go to a read style front or, play straight odd up front or, things like that. So I think that's what you really want to do is you want to make sure that for the players in the locker room, there's the least amount of disruption. That if I'm an older guy, coming back to my third, fourth, fifth year, that all of a sudden it's not like we're just wiping the whiteboard automatically clean. To the second part of your question, Daniel, I think that's still to be determined. I am observing this week of really finding out who they are and what they were, and you're always going to look for. I mean, I'm sure if Penn State, everywhere you are, you're always looking to improve on yourself week in and week out. So, I'll look at what I've done historically, what fits here. What ultimately the most important thing is what can our players do? What can they execute? And how can we make it harder on the offense? Ultimately, that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to make yourself more difficult to move the football against. And so that's really what spring will be about, is finding out what we're good at with the 2022 version of this defense, because personnel changes. You're never the same team from year to year, while at the same time not losing big picture stylistically what we want to be in terms of our aggressive nature and attacking style of play.
Final question to Andrew Clay from WTAJ.
Hey, Coach. As you know, Penn State has a history of being a really good defensive school. Does pressure come along with living up to that heritage?
Well, Andrew, you wouldn't want to coach here otherwise, and I think in this profession, I think the same thing is true of players. If you want to coach at a great program where winning is the expectation, or at a program like this one where playing great defense is the expectation, I don't feel that as pressure, because if you already have extraordinarily high expectations, it's very difficult for any external expectations to match your internal or exceed your internal expectations. I think pressure comes when there's an expectation outside greater than your own. So from a recruiting standpoint, yeah, everybody should want to play at LBU, but man, there's something that comes with that, and so you need to really want it, because if you come here, you have to understand, the great ones that you'll be compared to. And but I think that's what, if you're going to be a high achiever in any line of work, I think it'd be very hard to be a high achiever and view that as a pressure. To me, that's a privilege. That's an opportunity. And that's what makes it so fun to come to work every day.